Making hits. They were just going to let him make hits. Yeah, I do believe that.
In the early 80s, Brian, barely functioning, the band, which was also his family, hired psychologist Eugene Landy. The treatment was 24/7. Landy moved in. His staff taped Brian's every move, and it seemed to work.
And what about slow?
That felt great.
Brian Wilson is a perfect example of the fact that in my field, I'm an artist.
But 8 years later, Dr. Landy was still there, by then charging $420,000 a year for his services. Landy had moved into Brian's house. Brian moved into a rental. Landy got a grand piano. Brian got an upright. Landy became Brian's co-writer and executive producer. Landy shared in the $250,000 advance for Brian's memoir.
That's the way it should be.
Brian's daughters, who by this time had become rock stars on their own, weren't allowed to see Brian and never knew if he saw them.
I was thinking, God, I wish I could just call Dad and say, hey, did you see us on TV yesterday, or did you look at the charts? And I didn't know this, but he was following everything.
What attracted me to him was this guy that was scared, he was honest, he was yearning for somebody to love him.
In 1986, Brian met Melinda Ledbetter. It was Landy who asked her to date Brian. He controlled Brian. She says he thought he could control her, too. He couldn't.
Basically, everything was choreographed by Dr. Landy as far as my relationship with Brian. And even to the point at the end when he found out that I had asked Brian if Brian wanted me to help him out of the situation, and Brian said he did. I never saw Brian after that.
It was a 1991 settlement on the heels of Diane Sawyer's interview that separated Brian from Dr. Landy. His family, his daughters, his mother, his brother, and his cousin insisted on a conservator to handle Brian's affairs. The next year, 1992, Melinda ran into Brian, almost literally.
We hugged each other. We hadn't seen each other for 3 years, and he said, would you like to get together sometime? And I said, well, sure.
God only knows what I'd be without you.
3 years later, Brian's daughters, Carney and Wendy, sang at their wedding. Wouldn't it be nice if we were married, Brian Wilson once wrote. It is. And another chance at fatherhood with 2 daughters, Daria 3 and Delaney almost 2, makes things even nicer. But this isn't the happy ending. It's the beginning of the happy ending. Brian has just finished his first successful solo tour. Still awkward on stage, but he's there and he discovered something. He loves it.
As soon as the curtain went up, my head switched on. And the whole show was on.
Here was a man on stage being absolutely adored by the audience. He was loving it. They were loving it. What's not to like?
The great Brian Wilson.
You got standing ovation?
Yeah, I got standing ovations. Yeah.
How does that feel?
Felt kind of special. It was like a pump up, like, oh my God, look at these people love me, And I almost started crying.
He's able to catch up on the few thousand things he missed when he was too doped up to notice.
There's a London Times. They picked the 100 greatest albums ever. This was about
Really?
2 or 3 years ago.
And they chose Pet Sounds?
Number 1,
What was number 2?
Sgt. Pepper.
You got to be kidding.
I'm not kidding.
We were number 1 and 2?
Number 1.
That's impressive.
It's more than 30 years since Pet Sounds. Brian's parents, his brother Dennis, his brother Carl have all died. As unlikely as it seems, Brian is the survivor.
I imagine that the public never thought that he would outlive his other brothers and get well, but he has. And it's through his own will. And he says, I'm a Wilson. I've got a lot of willpower.
Do
you feel like you've been given a second chance?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, yes. I've been given a second and third chance, at least.
And is this going to be, is this the last one you need, or are you going to need any more chances?
I don't
or
know.
is
This
it?
time around, I'm not going to try to second guess anything or anybody. I'm just going to go off the top of my head, and whatever happens, happens.
Love and mercy tonight.
Even though some of his greatest songs are about surfing and cars, Brian Wilson didn't surf, and he never owned a hot rod.